Hey everyone, it's Friday. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Benit Brach here in the Vancouver newsroom. Here's what's happening this afternoon. Well, police in Prince George have confirmed one of the victims of a hit-and-run crash earlier this week has died. Shane Kelly is being remembered as a proud supporter of many Canadian Cancer Society fundraising events. RCMP say Kelly and another cyclist were struck earlier this week on Monday, and the driver didn't stay at the scene. Mounties and the Cancer Society say they are heartbroken. Shane is described as a caring and enthusiastic leader driven by a deep commitment to making a difference for children with cancer. Police say the investigation is ongoing and they are looking to speak to any witnesses of that incident. And a Langford family hoping to extend the life of their daughter who has a rare disease has been rejected again for coverage of medication that costs about $1 million a year. 9-year-old Charlie Pollock has Batten disease, a progressive and fatal genetic disorder. She had been receiving a drug to slow the progression of that illness. Charlie's family and advocates appealed for that drug to be continued, saying there was other information showing the drug might be beneficial. But BC's health minister says all material has been reviewed, and experts even consulted the drug manufacturer and found no reason to reverse their decision to end that coverage.
This has been one of the most challenging issues I've worked on since becoming health minister, and I take very seriously my role to ensure that BC has drug review processes that are independent, are evidence-based, and that they treat people equally. And I know that the outcome of this process is not the one that anyone was hoping for, most particularly Charlie's family.
She says back in May, the United Kingdom announced its intention to discontinue coverage for Brineura, that's the drug for the Batten disease, because of limited evidence for its long-term effectiveness. And workers at an Amazon facility in Delta have been given the green light to join Canada's largest private sector union. The BC Labour Relations Board has sided with Unifor, and it's granted the workers the right to certify. Unifor says the LRB ruling found that Amazon had interfered in the union applying for certification last year, and that the board agreed union certification was the only reasonable solution. The new Unifor members will now begin the process of negotiating their first collective agreement. Amazon says the decision goes against what their employees have said they wanted and deprives them of their right to make an informed decision. It says that it plans to appeal. And the Squamish Nation Youth Powwow is back this weekend. It starts today at the Homolchison Village, also known as Capilano 5 Reserve in West Vancouver. It's going to be running all weekend. It's going to celebrate Indigenous culture, music, and community. And the event's head chair says everyone is welcome.
Number one for viewers that haven't been to a powwow is that you're welcome. You're allowed to come to our powwow. We want you to come to our powwow. We are an open door. We want to tell you about our culture. We want to share a food with you, share our arts with you. Come be a part of powwow. It's so vibrant.
Yeah, definitely a gathering to look ahead at for this weekend. And more than 100 Indigenous artisan vendors will be there. That's what we have for you so far. You're watching CBC News BC. I'm Benit Brach. Stay with us. BC Today is coming up next.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. President Trump is threatening a 35% tariff on all Canadian goods by August 1st. But is it a real move or political posturing? And what's Canada's next play? And from counter service to coffee runs, tip prompts keep popping up. But as tip-flation spreads, are Canadians hitting their tipping point? I'm Amy Bell in for Michelle Elliott, and this is BC Today. Thank you for joining us on radio, TV, and live stream. You can call us now on our top story. How seriously do you take Trump's tariff threats? Our number is 604-669-3733. You can also call 1-800-825-5950 or hit pound 690. Email us bctoday@cbc.ca or comment on our TikTok live at CBC British Columbia. It has been months of back and forth tariff negotiations between Canada and the U.S., and now that saga hits another pressure point with Donald Trump's latest move. In a letter sent to Prime Minister Mark Carney, the U.S. president is now threatening to slap a higher tariff rate of 35% on Canadian goods, saying the rate would take effect on August 1st. Canada and the U.S. have been locked in negotiations to come to some sort of trade resolution by July 21st, but now Carney has extended that deadline to August 1st. The Prime Minister's office says Mark Carney will not offer remarks today in response to the fresh threat. In a statement last night, he said the Canadian government will work towards the revised deadline and reiterate its commitment to protect workers. Trump briefly addressed the letter earlier.
It was sent yesterday. They called. I think it was fairly well received, but it's what we need. So we'll see what happens. We've been taken advantage of for many, many years by countries, both friend and foe. And frankly, the friends have been worse than the foes in many cases. So I would say just keep working. It's all going to work out.
Trump cited fentanyl, quote, pouring into, unquote, the U.S. as one justification for the tariffs. That claim allows him to invoke special emergency powers that enable him to impose tariffs to protect American national security. He wrote to Mark Carney, "If Canada works with me to stop the flow of fentanyl, we will perhaps consider an adjustment to this letter." Premier David Eby took issue with those claims, talking to X and speaking to reporters in Prince George last night.
The letter is flailing, it's factually incorrect, and other efforts do come to mind. It really underlines the importance of the work we're doing in Canada to build a country where we're able to stand on our own 2 feet, diversify markets, and ensure that we're supporting each other across the country.
Now, in a statement last night, Mark Carney said Canada has made vital progress in stopping the flow of fentanyl in North America. So here's what we know about the flow of fentanyl from Canada to the U.S. These figures are from U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Between October 2024 and May 2025, Border Patrol agents seized 26 kilograms of fentanyl at the U.S.-Canada border. The previous year, between October 2023 and October 2024, 19 kilograms were seized. While this data shows an increase of seizures at the northern border, Canada is a significantly smaller player compared to the 3,700 kilograms of fentanyl agents seized at the U.S.-Mexico border this fiscal year. Prime Minister Mark Carney will be meeting on July 15th with his cabinet and the premiers to discuss a response. As for Thursday's 35% tariff announcement, we've seen this before. It started on February 1st, 12 days after the president's inauguration, when he first announced a 25% tariff on most Canadian goods and a 10% tariff on Canadian energy products. Then tariffs on steel and aluminum came, followed by automobiles and auto parts, followed by copper earlier this week. The term TACO, T-A-C-O, has become popularized this year as well. Trump always chickens out, but will he this time? So we're asking you, how seriously do you take Trump's recurring tariff threats? And how should Canada respond? Call us at 1-800-825-5950, pound 690 on your cell phone. You can email bctoday@cbc.ca. Joining me now is Jovian Radheshwar. He is a political science instructor at Douglas College. Sorry. Hi, Jovian. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Amy. Thanks for having me.
So I guess, first off, what do you make of Trump's new announcement of this 35% tariff across most Canadian goods on August 1st?
Well, I think it's clear that this is not about economics, it's about politics. If it was about economics, it would just be the most awful policy ever, which of course it is. But it's about politics, it's about threats, it's about being able to use threats as leverage, negotiating leverage. And we know that Trump has certain designs on Canadian territory, sovereignty, markets, market share, and resources, natural resources. We know that there's some politicians in Canada that have been flirting with the idea of sovereignty for various provinces, and there's a undercurrent in some cases of support for that. Not much, I would add. It's a very small minority, but it's a group that's increasingly emboldened. So I think this is about politics.
All right. Jovian, our phone lines are going off the hook. This is obviously a hot topic for a lot of people. We'll get to the first one. Chris in Richmond. Hi, Chris.
Hello.
Hi. How are you feeling about Trump's latest tariffs?
I think these ones will have a smaller impact.
Okay.
But overall, with the steel, aluminum, autos, there's definitely going to be a big impact to both job security and to cost of living as well for those people.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I think we really need to look at is ways to alleviate these impacts. And I think public transit is actually quite important here.
How so?
With yesterday, with the launch of the Mark V's, we're going to get more people on the trains. That means fewer people in cars that need to spend money on the gas and spend money on insurance and maintenance and so on and so forth. And we'll also employ more bus drivers and more bus manufacturers as well.
All very good points, Chris. Thank you for that. And Jovian, I did see you nodding rather emphatically there.
You know, public investment in our infrastructure and economy is an excellent way to make Canada more resilient. There was an article that was published just a few days ago on the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives website by the journalist Paris Marx, who advocates in that article for building cloud infrastructure publicly through a crown corporation in Canada, and that being a way to ease our dependence on the American tech giants. Of course, the recent issue with the digital services tax and the government's climb down from going through with that tax, illustrate this point. So there are many examples in our economy where we could have a kind of backbone of public investment that would give us a lot of resiliency.
A lot of people echoing that focusing inward and strengthening what we have so we're less reliant on the U.S. We'll take a call now from Cam in Cobble Hill. Hi, Cam. How are you feeling about this latest round of tariffs?
I'm worried about it. I think CBC too nobody brings up. I hear about these pipelines getting built. Why don't we turn the crude that we get from the tar sands, which is heavy oil or whatever, turn it into light oil or light crude to where it's got to be exported. It's easier to clean up. Actually employ some people here or build some refineries. You used to have 7 refineries in British Columbia. Now you only have 2. You used to have truck manufacturers. The largest truck manufacturer in Canada was Hayes. From 1922 to 1975 in Vancouver, they built trucks, and you had Pacific, all bought out. Well, Hayes was shut down by an American company. I mean, I think they should cut off the amount of no potash and cut off the oil. And I think the premier of Alberta should take a look at doing something for Canada instead of just the province of Alberta. And the province of Quebec should get some oil. Where are they getting their oil from? They got to look at it there. They'd stopped a lot of stuff that's happened too.
All right, Cam, thank you for that. And, he raises those points that we've seen that systematic over years and years of more business going to the U.S., more companies from the U.S. taking over Canadian companies. And we really need to perhaps shift so that we are focusing inward and making sure that we aren't reliant on those U.S. companies as much anymore. Another call coming in from Yan in Langford. Hi, Yan.
Yeah, hi there. It's Jan.
Oh, Jan, sorry.
I think it's super serious. I think this we need a war footing stance, and I think we need a coalition government. I'm hearing baffled gab from all the different premiers, Daniel Smith and Dave Eby and Rob Ford and the Quebec guy, Yves Lange, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And then at the federal level, we're hearing Poilievre, bluster, and it's just I think we need to form take a war stance and look at forming a coalition of individuals, members of parliament at the federal level who are deadly serious. This is a very serious thing for the next 4 years. Mm-hmm. So I just think that we need to take it seriously. That's what I think.
Well, thank you, Jan. And I think, Jovian, we were sort of talking about this, we come up with these acronyms like TACO and sort of see a lot of bluster and bullying in Trump's words. And as we see more and more of these tariffs, it's kind of like the boy who cried wolf. You stop paying attention as much. But we really do need to always pay attention because we never know what Trump is going to do or what he's capable of. I'm curious why you think Trump would even sort of lay on this new 35% tariff right now when we're in the middle of these negotiations with the U.S. to come to a trade agreement.
It's a very astute analysis and question, and I think that it's really important to understand that there's a psychological dimension to what's going on with Donald Trump right now. He's clearly very interested in power, if I can put that very politely. He's quite concerned about his power levels. His insecurity around having enough power is also palpable. The whole world is experiencing that right now, from negotiating with Iran to then striking Iran, to launching these horrific ice raids in Southern California in the last few days, to levying tariffs not just against Canada, but also Japan and South Korea in the recent days as well. And of course, Brazil was in the news yesterday before the 35% number regarding Canada came up. There was a 50% number regarding Brazil, and that's not about economics. The Brazil tariffs, that's about politics explicitly. He's going to bat for Jair Bolsonaro. Mm-hmm. So Trump is lashing out in a way that somebody having a mental decline is lashing out. And I agree, we really need to take this very seriously, bring everybody on board. If it's formally a coalition government or not, that's another question. But indeed, the Conservatives did vote with the Carney government on the nation building bill recently. So that suggests that there's at least a nucleus of some people from all sides of the political spectrum in Canada that are trying to step up and defend Canada. And indeed, we're going to have to think much more creatively about the kinds of steps that we have to take. And I hope that that's something that Carney and the premiers are going to address in their upcoming meetings.
I'll take another call now from Jillian. Hi, Jillian. Thanks for calling in.
Hello.
And how are you feeling?
I am, number one, he's Taco. But one thing that we don't have any large appliance manufacturing in this country. There's all the talk about infrastructure, but this is a different kind of infrastructure. Mm. There are no domestically made large appliances. We could use the copper, the steel, the aluminum, the expertise, and the downed automotive facilities to retool and start producing our own domestic appliances.
Okay.
With, for example, things that we need here. I have a fridge that's 24 inches. I cannot get an Energy Star fridge in that size.
Right.
So, tool for Canada, use the resources that we have, produce something we need.
Very fair point, Jillian. Thank you so much for calling in. Jovian, you sort of mentioned it as well with this nucleus of perhaps a coalition government. If Trump has done nothing else, it seems to have united a lot of people across the country that perhaps may not see eye to eye. How do we sort of keep that momentum going forward? So as we focus inward, we're not, fighting against each other as much.
Yeah, that's a great question too. You know, before the election, meaning our Canadian election, there was, of course, a lot of division in the months leading up to the election. Of course, when Trump started making his threats, we have the switch of Carney for Trudeau, and then we see a bit more unity around Carney as a sort of uniting figure. But recently, with the capitulation on the digital services tax, I think that he really challenged his brand to some degree. So I really hope that he manages to get some support back, maybe even consider bringing that tax back just as a signal to say that we're going to stand up. The digital services taxes have been applied in other countries. So certainly we're in a position to at least do what the European Union is doing. So we really need to rally people around that message, and they need to message around it a little better. The people in Ottawa need to really get people on board around the country with, effective messaging about the need to stand up against Trump and call him out for what he is. This is a dictator. This is a person that's engaging in fascist politics, and the world has not done well when there have been fascists, and neighboring countries don't do particularly well either. And we really are facing a grave threat to our sovereignty, right? The economic issue is very important, and it's a microcosm of the sovereignty issue, but the sovereignty issue is the bigger issue right now.
That's an excellent point. I appreciate you making that. We do have a comment on our TikTok live. It's from Victoria Hayden, 851. It says, Trump is destroying the U.S. Don't give him a foothold in Canada. We also have an email from Lorraine that states, I am thankful to David Eby for standing up for us British Columbians. I do hope to see the same thing with Mark Carney. He needs to show Donald Trump that we will not stand down. Jovian, in the letter regarding these latest tariffs, Trump wrote that he will increase the levies if Canada retaliates, and he has done this before. So in a sense, does he have the upper hand here?
I mean, he does insofar as America's economy is, I guess the number's about 10 times or so bigger than Canada's economy.
Right.
So that's something that gives him leverage baked into the negotiation. Does his tactic necessarily indicate sophistication? I don't know. I don't think so, frankly. It's just essentially using his larger size to try to bully. But that doesn't mean that we don't have some things that we can do in response. And of course, we run the risk of higher tariffs, but in a way, small businesses are going to be the ones that are most hurt by the uncertainty, right? Maybe even big businesses too, because 35% is, of course, a very large number in terms of an amount for tariffs. But small businesses are going to see a massacre because they can't really plan their buying and their, inventory practices at all at this point, because even if he's going to chicken out, it creates so much market uncertainty that if they're borrowing money in order to do an expansion of production, this sort of thing, they're not going to be able to get a reliable lending relationship with a bank, and banks are going to be leery of lending money as well. And this can, of course, put a lot of pressure on the macroeconomics, meaning the finances of Canada, the value of the Canadian dollar. So we really have to think about how to shore up the value of the Canadian dollar, make Canada a target for investors around the world, except for the United States, and also build up our domestic capacity at the same time. And also at the same time, make sure that we have strong alliances with other countries. We see recently the UK and France saying that they're going to cover each other with regard to nuclear umbrella security. We might be in a similar situation sooner than we'd like to be.
And that's what I was going to ask you as well. If we look globally, are there certain partners that you think would be the smartest, certain countries or areas, governments even, that we would be well suited to partner with?
Well, I think that Canada would be really well suited to work with the EU, maybe even join the EU. That might be a formal joining or some kind of a liaison relationship where we're sort of inside the EU without actually being inside the EU. Maybe not adopting the euro, for example, but something like that would be essential. France has been, quite strong in its relationship with Canada. Macron and Carney seem seem to get along quite well. Keir Starmer has not been as strong with regard to supporting Canada because they have their own sort of special Atlantic relationship with the U.S. that they're trying to preserve right now. But I imagine that they're, facing a lot of these issues as well. So there is a kind of coalition that can emerge. Recently, we've also been exploring buying defense hardware from South Korea. I think that would be a very intelligent thing to further go down that line. Japan as well would perhaps be a good potential ally. And while we don't see eye to eye for good reason on politics with the government of the People's Republic of China, at the very least, it's a country that is not politically threatening Canada right now. We face the same issue about their larger companies possibly, taking over part of our market share. So we would have to be careful about that relationship. But certainly if we can come up with a mutually agreeable, mutually beneficial relationship with China while also preserving our political sovereignty, at the very least, that might allow us to leverage, that relationship. But these things are all very difficult because, of course, we know when Ukraine started getting closer to the EU, that, of course, invoked the ire of their bigger neighbor to the north, the Russians.
Yes.
And we are actually in a very similar position. It's very dangerous.
Jovian, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you, as always, for taking and making time for us today.
Thank you so much, Amy.
Jovian Radheshwar is a political science instructor at Douglas College, and feel free to keep your emails coming in on this subject, bctoday@cbc.ca. It is 12:27. And yesterday, we looked at divorce registries to provide support when marriages end, just like wedding registries at the start of the journey. Here are a few of your comments. Denise wrote, "Presents aren't support, presence is support." I like that. Joanne wrote, "In British Columbia, the BC Family Maintenance Agency provides services to help families manage and enforce family maintenance orders and agreements. This includes collecting and distributing support payments, as well as taking steps to enforce orders when payments are missed." Joanne also stated that the divorce agreement is extremely important and you need to look way into the future. "Our agreement covered child support until our child completed her university degree. Research, research, research." And Randy wrote, "I like what this represents, but feel the illustrations presented were not really well founded. More on the mental supports and less on the towels, meals, and legal services would have been more beneficial." Janet said, "It sounds like a money grab. Like most people, I think people should work and accumulate household items gradually and as they can be afforded. Why do so many people think they are entitled to household items without working for them?" Thank you, as always, for your thoughts and comments. And you can always email us about this or any topic at bctoday@cbc.ca. And this is BC Today on CBC. We're on Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming on our website, cbc.ca/BC, YouTube at CBC Vancouver, and on the CBC News app. It is now time for the CBC Newscast with Amelia John.
Good afternoon. Health Minister Josie Osborne says experts have concluded there is no clinical evidence that a costly rare disease medication that would provide further benefits to Charlie Pollock. Osborne says all evidence presented by advocates for patients of Batten disease was considered by the province's expert committee on providing expensive drugs for rare diseases. She says the committee stands by its previous ruling to discontinue providing the drug to the girl. Another cyclist has been sent to hospital in Prince George after being hit by a vehicle this morning. RCMP say the 17-year-old rider has serious injuries. Police have also confirmed the victim of a hit and run who was hospitalized Monday has now died. They've identified the rider as Shane Kelly, a member of the Cops for Cancer charity bike ride. And BC's Minister of Citizen Services says 2 remote West Vancouver Island communities near Ucluelet will soon have access to high-speed internet. Says the projects will be built and operated by internet service provider City West through investments from the company, as well as the provincial and federal governments. And now the BC forecast. Along the north coast today, rain at heavy at times, highs around 15 degrees. In the Peace, mainly cloudy with a chance of showers, some wind gusts, a high of 21. For the central interior, including Prince George, showers, a bit windy, high of 19. In the southeast, mainly sunny, highs around 30 degrees. For the southern interior, lots of sun, highs around 30 as well. And for the south coast, sunshine, highs around 30 degrees inland. And that is your CBC News from Vancouver.
Thank you so much for that, Amelia. And lots more on the day's top stories on the afternoon show in your region. Here in Metro Vancouver, this is what's coming up on the coast.
Amy, hello there. It's Gloria Makarenko here, and I would love it if you could join us for On the Coast this afternoon. We're going to talk about the opening of the Kitsilano pool. Yes, it's open for the summer, but the city is warning that the pool is at the end of its usable lifespan. So we're going to talk to a group of Kits Pool swimmers who are going to share their hopes and dreams for the future of that iconic pool. Also, 3 students from Surrey have just taken home awards in Canada's largest science fair, so we'll hear more about their projects on the program today. And our pop culture columnist, Rad Simon Pillay, will be here. We're going to talk about the latest controversy over the new Superman movie. So I hope you can join us for that and much more this afternoon between 3 and 6 on the coast.
Thank you, Gloria. And you can hear On the Coast on CBC Radio 1 in Metro Vancouver and anywhere on the CBC News app. From cozy coffee shops in Victoria to fine dining in Vancouver, BC's food scene is as rich and diverse as the people behind it. But behind every carefully crafted cocktail and tasting menu is a workforce that depends on something many of us are rethinking: tipping. As the cost of living climbs, more people are asking what's up with all the tip prompts, even for or at self-serve counters. And should restaurants still be leaning on tips to fill that gap left by lower wages? So today we're digging into the tipping culture in BC, how it really works, why it's so complicated, and what the people in the industry want you to know. And of course, we want to hear from you. What's your take on tipping? Has tipping gotten out of hand? Call us at 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone, and you can email bctoday@cbc.ca. Joining us today are 2 guests: Sean Grady, General Manager at Como Taperia, and Jamie Mah, a bartender at the Fairmont Pacific Rim Hotel and host of the podcast Track and Food. Good afternoon to both of you.
Afternoon. Thanks for having us.
Hello. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for coming in. Okay, so first question, how did you both find yourself in the hospitality industry, and how long have you been in the hospitality industry? Sean, I'll start with you.
Yeah, coming up on 10 years in the restaurant industry. It's kind of the family business. It's what my grandpa, my dad, my sisters all did. And it's a really gratifying and almost addicting industry. People want you to succeed. So even if you try to make your way out of it, it's hard to leave. So you get pushed into it through the family, and it just keeps sucking you back in. Next thing you know, you're just in a career now.
I love that. Jamie, how long have you been in?
Oh man, I started at McDonald's when I was 16, and then did that to university, and then I started at Earl's, and as most people do in this industry, and then just kind of grew from there and fell in love with the industry very, very quickly. I love working with people. I love that dynamic and the energy and the fast-paced environment, and obviously I love food and wine and drink. So it's a really unique industry.
It is a unique industry, and there's so many different, avenues that you can take in the industry itself and ways that it, interacts with other industries. So it seems like it's always very exciting. When we think about tips, we often think about service, good service, and that is what we're providing the tip for. But what does good service mean? What are people really tipping on? Sean, I will start with you again.
Yeah. Service and hospitality are two different things. You are tipping on the service that you're receiving. That's being taken to a table, having somebody cook the food for you, do all the cleaning up for you. That is the aspect of service that you're tipping on. But on top of that, you're also receiving hospitality. You're being made feel welcome. You're feeling like you're part of something. There are other cultural and emotional aspects to a restaurant that hospitality workers provide. That the tip is kind of just a reward on top of providing that hospitality on top of the service you're already paying for.
And Jamie, do you agree? It's sort of service and hospitality being very different in a sense?
Yeah, service, you can categorize that into a lot of things, whether you're getting a cab ride with someone and or you're getting coffee at a coffee shop. But hospitality, especially specifically for what he and I do in our restaurants, is we definitely are trying to elevate the experience for the guest and the consumer. And we want to make sure the guest feels acknowledged and seen and excited about being a part of the establishment and being, we want to make sure that they want to come back and have a memorable experience. And I think tipping is an old custom that has remained in our culture. Is it a flawed system? Probably in some ways, I would say. But there is good and bad in it, in the systems. But I think for us as workers, we just hope that consumers understand that we are grateful for any tips that we receive and that we really care about what we do and we want to make sure that you have a wonderful experience. And so I think that's something that comes from a genuine feeling inside for all of us.
Yeah. And I think sometimes people forget about that it's, the people that are in the hospitality industry, they genuinely, they're not doing it just for the tips. They're doing it because they want you to have this great experience. And the tip is something that could happen and is much appreciated. You mentioned something though that I've thought about often, that it's, it's an old tradition. I have no idea where that tradition came from. Like, where did we become a tipping society? How did that come to be?
There's various things you could look back in history, but it sadly is kind of born out of slavery.
Oh, okay.
And it was born out of, we're not going to pay you a wage, but if you want to get something, do your best, and maybe the people will give you some money. That's
kind of the dangling carrot.
Kind of, exactly. And I think it's just a custom that's kind of fallen through our society. I think it's interesting in the sense of how people view it. I know some people struggle with it a little bit, but I think most people are really comfortable providing generosity to people that provide a good and memorable experience. But I can understand the change in people's attitudes towards it, because before now you're getting these machines handed to you and they're just built in with automatic prompts for you. So I can see that obviously is filtering out into other kind of areas of hospitality in some way.
Yeah.
So I think I can see why people might be like, where does this kind of stop?
Where does this end? Like, where do you draw that line?
Where do you draw that line?
And that uncomfortableness when you're handed that machine and it already has that tip option open. There's almost an embarrassment sometime of clicking the no tip option, even when you know that they haven't really provided any service. We'll get more into that in a moment. I do want to get to some calls from people that want to weigh in. We'll talk to Tom in Kelowna. Hi, Tom.
Good morning. Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing great. How do you feel about tipping?
I am burnt out.
Okay.
And I came to a realization, as a matter of fact, last 3 summers in a row, we traveled extensively throughout Europe. And I noticed something completely different. Using restaurants as an example, there's lots of people in various small towns, large towns, who are middle-aged adults, so not just college kids or anything like that. This is their only job, and not a single tip prompt. And obviously, they make livable wages because this is one job in a small town. They're able to pay the rent or whatever it is that the cost of livings are. So it is possible to arrange the industry in a way where people can make a livable income, and you can always provide reward for exceptional service. But it is a job, after all.
Yeah, no,
My physiotherapist doesn't ask for a tip. My barber does. You go to a doctor, great service. The receptionist, fantastic customer service. Everybody, we live in a society where we exchange services and goods all the time. Grocery stores, whatever it is. So why is industry in restaurants the only one that's kind of singled out mainly for this tipping option when it is possible in many, many countries around the world to earn a livable income having that job? And it's a fun job. When I was younger, I was doing it. I love the interaction with people.
Yeah.
It's always adventure. You have no idea who the table is going to be. But it is a job, and they should get paid more, in my opinion, not rely on us. And the tips, honestly, are getting ridiculous. 18% to start on these multiple options. 18 ends up sometimes even 40%, which is outrageous asking.
Tom, I really appreciate you calling in because you raise a really good point that, elsewhere in the world, and Europe is what he mentioned, being a restaurant server is not treated as a step to a real career. It is treated as a real career. They're paid as such. Here in Canada, though, we know that the minimum wage, which is what many people in the industries will make, is $17.85. The living wage for Metro Vancouver is $27.50. There's a huge disparity there. So how does the industry make up for that? Is tips the only answer to sort of not legitimizing these careers, but helping people to have this as a career that they can live off, that they can fulfill their various demands with? Sean, I'll put that to you first.
Yeah, it is a tough situation that hospitality workers are in Europe when the cost of living and the cost of operating a business is lower. It is much easier for restaurants to pay their staff a living wage. Here, the cost of operating a business is much higher. And unfortunately, as a culture, that responsibility to take care of hospitality staff has fallen on the public in different ways. This isn't falling on the public in ways that's reflected on menu cost or the cost of operating. This responsibility is falling on our guests to make up that difference in the cost of operating. And that's just a reality that restaurant workers have to live with and are kind of used to. I don't know many hospitality workers who just have one job. The beauty and flexibility of hospitality work is that you have the time to pick up extra shifts if you have the capacity and time to work a job in the morning and then work in the restaurant in the evening, or the other way around. So it just leads to people needing to work more until the cultural shift happens that has happened in Europe, where the responsibility to take care of people starts falling onto businesses instead of consumers. But right now, that's where we're at, and that's what hospitality workers are doing to get themselves closer to the livable wage in BC.
We'll take another call now from Chris in Victoria. Hi, Chris. What are your thoughts on tipping culture?
Hi, thanks very much for taking my call today. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
So I spent my youth, working in jobs where I relied heavily on tips as a part of my wage, primarily, bartending, serving, that kind of thing. So I 100% appreciate that in certain industries, if you're getting paid whatever the minimum wage is, it probably makes sense for you to expect some tips for the type of job that you do. But similar to what, a lot of other people have said, I'm starting to get a little bit burnt out on the fact that I'm getting prompted to tip in so many scenarios that I just don't think that it makes sense for me to be supplementing that worker's wage. So I think the major problem is that like all employers, from, people who are, paying their careered salaried workers all the way to people in, any basic, minimum wage job, all employers are not keeping up with with salaries that align with the increasing cost of living. And it seems to be getting worse and worse every year. I know in my personal job, it gets worse and worse every year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where the problem lies. Now, where that solution is, I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think it should be me having to tip, my Subway artist who's just made me a nice sandwich.
All right. Thank you very much for that. We have an email from Tom now. It says, I have no problem tipping when I get good service. I hate that almost every restaurant calculates the tip on top of the tax. I feel like I'm getting ripped off. It puts a negative note on what has usually been a very pleasant experience. Not a good way to end my time there. Thank you for reaching out to us, Tom. When we're talking about that disparity between what the average worker in a restaurant or a bar might make compared to what they would need to just have that job. If we're supplementing it by tips and we're starting to see that tip fatigue where people are perhaps a little less willing to tip, do you see at any point in the near future there being a shift in Canada where we are starting to rely less on tips and actually starting to move towards a model where we're paying a living wage to our hospitality workers? Jamie, I'll throw it to you on that one.
Well, I mean, I think you could see that. I think what you would need is you would need a big either policy shift through the government, or you would need a large swath of establishments taking on the challenge of changing. A lot of this is based around consumer perception too.
Sure.
If you're going to take away the tips and they have to start paying a different wage for hospitality employees, prices are going to go up.
Yeah.
Probably quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that consumers might not be willing or to accept, or it's a sticker shock probably a little bit.
Well, and there is always that cause and effect that people don't realize. The cost has to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And we're already seeing that in some sense with all of the tariffs and the cost of living increases. It is far more expensive to go out to a restaurant and to have a nice meal. And then when you do put that tip on top of it, it is sticker shock sometimes. And for that to increase, I suppose there's that danger that it would just be out of price for many people now, and so you'd have less business. You may not be relying on tips, but you're certainly going to see a downturn in your overall business. Clearly, I don't have all the answers. I'm just spitballing here. We'll take a call now from Doug in Salmon Arm. Hi, Doug. Wow. How do you feel about tips?
So I am actually mixed on it. I work in an industry that does deal with tips.
Okay.
I try not to get my shirt in a knot over tips because, it all, in the end, it all balances out. And I think the problem with tips are great. I'm not going to lie. I do like the tips. But I think the problem with tips is the person who is getting the tips, they expect the tip. And sometimes they don't put their whole 100% into it. And I think the other problem is if they know that person X is a flush, has cash out the wazoo and they're great tippers, they're going to give that person great service. And if they know that person Y is not a good tipper, they're going to give them crappy service. And I don't think that's great. I think if you're going to work in the service industry, you need to give, doesn't matter if they're the richest person in the world or the poorest person in the world, they need to get great service across the whole spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it balances out. I do deliveries, right? And I can make a delivery 100 meters down the road from where I am and get a great tip. But then I can make a delivery that's 5 kilometers away and not get a tip. That shouldn't affect how I operate. It's just the nature of the beast. And as I was telling your producer, at the end of the day, the person who's giving the tip has the control. They can say, yes, you deserve a tip, or no, you don't deserve a tip. And I can tell you from experience, the thing that I've noticed is, how we have the tap ability on our debits and our credit cards? I have noticed that when people want a tip, when they want to tap, they're not so interested in giving a tip. They get locked and loaded and they just say, push all the buttons for me and I'll tap. And so the thought of tipping when it comes to tap is not even there.
That is not even something I thought about, Doug, but thank you for that. He does raise a good point, though. I guess there's that perception of, being biased to somebody you know will give you a good tip as opposed to somebody that won't, that perhaps leads people thinking they have to tip well so that they will receive good service the next time. Is that something we're seeing more of or less of, or is that really not an issue?
I mean, I hope that doesn't happen. But it probably does. I think that's just probably human nature in some ways, where you see things like that. But I mean, I think overall, what I'm hearing from these callers is our society maybe needs to revisit our view of tipping in general. Maybe it's kind of where some people are maybe landing on.
Yep.
And I just want to say that as hospitality workers, we work in a system that's just kind of been there for us. And I can get people's frustrations and stuff like that. But I think, I don't know. I mean, it's a tricky situation. I think I understand the view, but I think I hope that people understand that we try our best to make sure that you still get a great experience. But I don't know. It's an interesting system.
It is an interesting system, and I think that's why it gets bandied about so much, is that it's a very easy topic to see multiple sides of and not necessarily fall firmly in one camp or the other. Sean, I know hospitality workers quite typically also spend a lot of their money in the hospitality industry. So they are very well versed in where a tip goes, how it's divvied amongst the other workers. Is that something, though, that a lot of people, perhaps in the general public, aren't realizing, that when they tip, it's not just going to the server, it's perhaps going to the hostess, it's going to the busser, it's going to the dishwasher? Is that something is that something that needs to be better maybe laid out for people in tipping?
I do believe it does, yeah. That responsibility does fall on us to communicate that to guests, that a percentage of all the gratuities that come into the restaurant in most situations do go to everybody. That touches the food, the merchandise, the tables. It does fall on us to communicate that. But just like in any restaurant community or any industrial community at all, the money that you're putting into that community doesn't just wind up in those people's pockets. It gets funneled back into that community.
Right.
You tip your server, that money goes into either another restaurant in the use of a tip at somebody else's restaurant, or that money goes back into their community. If they're an artist, the money that you tip a server also winds up back in that artist's community. If they're part of a certain culture, that money goes into that cultural community as well. So that's something I do wish people realize more, that tips aren't just something that goes right into our pockets.
Right.
It's something that enables passionate young hospitality workers to continue building up their own community
And be part
in
of
the way
that.
that they know.
Be part of that continuation. We have a lot of calls, so I want to get to them. Roger in Victoria. Hi, Roger.
Thanks for taking my call.
Of course.
Hi. Yeah, this is a really interesting topic. And I was just thinking as I was listening that to me, as a consumer, I don't work in a service industry, but it definitely seems that since the pandemic, during the pandemic when we had a lack of workers and businesses had to shut, when businesses began to reopen, it seems like tipping kind of began to spread, proliferated everywhere. And especially when foreign workers were unavailable for a while, tipping kind of became this thank you for being there. And as like speaks to the generosity of Canadians, that we wanted to kind of give more to support local businesses and just kind of thank workers just for showing up.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, it just seems to have kind of spread this way, but it does definitely need to be reined in. Like it just needs to kind of, somehow be retracted.
Walk it back a little bit. Yeah, no, that is a really good point, Roger. Thank you for that. We'll talk now with Susan in Victoria. Hi, Susan. Thanks for calling.
Oh, hi. I just wanted to comment on, I guess, like in the service industry specifically, which I worked in for some time, like probably about 10 years ago, at that time at least, and prior to, I believe, 2021, servers did not actually make minimum wage. They made a server's wage, and that was, I think, maybe specific to establishments that were serving liquor.
Okay.
So servers, bartenders. So for a long time in BC, it was legal to pay servers, and it was not only legal, but like this is the standard. It was agreed upon that you would get paid less than minimum wage. So at the time that I was working, it was like $8, and the minimum wage was maybe $10. I think at the time that it changed in 2021, the minimum wage was like just above $15 an hour, which is what they brought it up to from, I think, about $13 an hour.
Okay.
And so at the time, it made so much sense. Of course, you're going to add gratuity to your bill and do it. Like I would do so willingly, especially knowing that servers made less. But I don't think that was common knowledge, and since been corrected. But I think that was sort of like what it was rooted in was like there was an assumption that you were going to be making good money as long as you were doing a good job, even though the compensation from your employer was significantly less than the minimum wage.
Right.
So, and then to see that, like, especially having gone through that experience, then to see that, like at a retail establishment that they're asking for tips, it feels a little bit like, am I not already paying for the thing?
Yeah, it does seem we definitely have that sort of bias. Like we're pretty good and pretty accepting. It seems like in the restaurants and the bars, and we understand that tip scheme. But yes, if you're going to try on clothes, perhaps you're not as keen to hit that tip option. We had a couple comments from TikTok as well. It says tips are insane and the government makes you claim for taxes but not for benefits. It's also wild. They want tips at Subway now when I have to tell you how to make the sandwich. And from SasquatchAdventures.ca, I never visit liquor stores. I never realized they ask for tips when it's only resale. And Kat says, I work in a restaurant and any food industry, even including fast food places, think it's an easy job. One thing about the food industry, I believe if you've worked in one, you're a great tipper for life. Agree?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
That is all the time we have for today, but I thank you both. That is Sean Grady, General Manager at Como Taperia, and Jamie Mah, a bartender at the Fairmont Pacific Rim Hotel and host of the podcast Track and Food. They joined us today to talk about tips.